walk us through the committee's criminal referrals to the Department of Justice and what they all mean.
Well, in the end, there were 4 criminal referrals to the Department of Justice. Those now go to special counsel Jack Smith to make his determination over whether he wants to actually pursue charges against former President Trump. 2 of those referrals, the first 2, let's go over them right now, were submitted for both President Trump and John Eastman, the lawyer who he worked with. They include obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States. The next 2 were just Trump alone, conspiracy to make a false statement, and then also inciting, assisting, aiding or comfort an insurrection. Now, those are the 4 charges that the committee is basically handing off to the Department of Justice. They say there's ample evidence. They've released already a 156-page executive summary of the Select Committee's report. They also voted unanimously to send those 4 charges and some other charges to the Department of Justice in order to continue the investigation there. Now, the Department of Justice has been conducting its own investigation through special counsel Jack Smith of the January 6th attack and any potential charges that need to come out of that investigation. What the committee is doing, though, is in its closing days, as Republicans prepare to take control of the 118th session of the House of Representatives this coming January, they're sending those charges as well as evidence to the Department of Justice, asking them to continue the investigation and pursue charges versus former President Trump. Again, it's not clear if the Department of Justice would pursue those charges against the former president, but this contains massive symbolic value to ask the Department of Justice formally and for all of the committee members to unanimously vote to send those charges to the DOJ.
Yeah, I was going to say, how serious of a message is this with these referrals?
It's an incredibly serious message, and for one, this is something that many of the committee members have made their task over the past roughly 2 years of this committee. Their goal, at least as stated by Representative Jamie Raskin, a member of the committee who read these charges aloud, is partially to block former President Trump from ever holding the Oval Office again, which is why they included that final insurrection charge be recommended to the Department of Justice. Here's Representative Jamie Raskin.
It is a grave federal offense anchored in the Constitution itself, which repeatedly opposes insurrections and domestic violence, and indeed uses participation in insurrection by office holders as automatic grounds for disqualification from ever holding public office again at the federal or state level. Anyone who incites others to engage in rebelling, assists them in doing so, or gives aid and comfort to those engaged in insurrection is guilty of a federal crime. The committee believes that more than sufficient evidence exists for a criminal referral of former President Trump for assisting or aiding and comforting those at the Capitol who engaged in a violent attack on the United States.
And that's just one of the 4 charges that the Select Committee is asking the Department of Justice to pursue against former President Trump. It's worth noting that this is, of course, symbolic in nature. This does not require the Department of Justice to pursue those charges, but this is the unanimous recommendation of that panel. And it's also worth noting there are various members of that panel who in the past have made clear that keeping President Trump out of federal office, from holding federal office ever again, was part of their drive during this investigation by sending that unanimous referral of that charge in addition to the other 3 charges to the Department of Justice. All committee members have made very clear they do not feel President Trump should ever hold the role of president ever again.